So glad you brought up demography.
Next topic.
Because one of the most interesting takeaways, which you alluded to, Mike, was from President Obama's reelection, was the influence of the changing demography for our presidential elections. And we just wanted to point out, in 1992, when Bill Clinton was first elected, the white share of the vote was 87%, and the minority share was 13%. In Obama's reelection, those numbers changed to 72% white and 28% non-white. Interestingly, Mitt Romney actually got a similar share of the white vote as other winning Republicans, and I might add winning Republicans who won in landslides. There was just a lot fewer white voters as part of the electorate. And the white share of the vote is expected to increase from 28% in 2012 to 31% in 2016 and 34% in 2020. So I think this is what you're really
yeah, I mean, just I mean, we're talking about the House and Senate and the difficult landscape for the Democrats. Just how difficult is the country now at the presidential level for the Republicans? And looking ahead to 2016 in light of these numbers, what's your sense?
Well, I mean, I think these are very important numbers, and I think one other thing that's happening within these numbers, and Amy would know this better than I do, but that these numbers are also beginning to have a real impact at a state level, not yet at a House level, and that may take a very long time.
Until they.
But they are actually beginning to be visible. You know, in a number of states, and and over the next few years, will start to affect Senate races as well. You know, a Republican could still be elected president, but it's going to be a different kind of Republican, and it's going to be a different kind of election, and that's what the demographics are destiny. Or is destiny. Demographics plural or singular?
38 states now have the state legislature and the governor are the same party, so it's sorting out within those states, and that's why you're seeing lots of legislation coming out of the states right now, which is very, very different. Well, you want to look ahead to 2016 while we're Sure.
Might as well.
Okay, we got a familiar face. I also want to talk about Bill Clinton before we leave. Still the #1 surrogate more than 20 years after having been elected. But
I mean,
oh, me? You?
who are these people?
Who are these people?
Who are all these people?
Well, okay, so here we got Hillary Clinton, and whether your take on, she's back in the role of inevitable, the role she had in '08. Your take on whether she's going to run or not, and then also this diffuse crowd of Republicans who Barbara's going to press.
Let's take Hillary Clinton.
You want to start with Hillary?
We'll start with Hillary Clinton.
Okay. What's your sense of what's going on?
Is the timing right? Is she going to?
Well, she didn't have any choice about timing. This is it. She's either doing it or not.
68 years old. Yeah, she'll be 68. So this is it.
If she wanted to give signals that she wasn't going to run and that she wanted to ride off in the sunset her career and be a grandmother and not be in public life, she hasn't given that signal at all. Now, things can always change, and a lot of times, we would see like, we're convinced this politician's going to do X, Y, and Z, and then we get a big surprise. But everything that she has done from leaving Secretary of State post to now all puts her in a position to be able to run. I think that is the expectation, but of course we've always been surprised in the past. And if she does run, I think there's a greater likelihood than not that not a single credible Democrat would actually primary her. And so in a lot of ways, she would almost be running as an incumbent campaign where the outgoing Secretary of State would almost be acting as if the vice president heading into the next election. In a lot of ways, you could almost view what Hillary Clinton would try to do is what George H.W. Bush did for Ronald Reagan in 1988 and give Reagan a third term. One of the reasons why I think Barack Obama and a lot of his people would encourage a Hillary run is that, boy, you do cement in that health care law, you cement in almost everything that we've done in the White House, getting 4 additional years. And, looking back at George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan, they both had a big primary fight in 1980. They did not like each other during that campaign. And one served as a loyal lieutenant and ended up getting 4 years in the White House. And I think for a lot of reasons, I'm almost kind of seeing Hillary Clinton, even though she would have a different historical role, as almost a parallel in what I think Democrats are hoping for.
And of course, that's her problem.
That's, I was just going to say, that it'd be great to come
exactly
after Reagan
her
as
problem.
the
Yeah.
economy's booming and
I mean, the fact
popularity
is
was
that
really-
running as an incumbent Democrat in 2016 might actually be a pretty
Worst thing.
unpleasant task.
That's right.
So that, if anything, Lee, what she may well be thinking about right now is not, can I win the Democratic nomination? Because as you said, it's probably not going to be that hard, even with the... She doesn't wear the mantle of inevitability well. It wasn't good for her last time. It's not good for her this time. It may not be a problem in the Democratic primary, but it could be a huge problem in a general election.
But just one quick counter, and of course, yeah, those of us who followed Hillary in 2008 knows anything can happen. But when we go back to that demographic, those slides earlier, and if you're assuming that 31% of the electorate in 2016 is going to be minority in the general election, and you have a white female who's running who will probably overperform among females and then do better than Obama among whites, you're kind of looking at someone who can easily get 51, 52% of the electorate.
But third terms are tough.
But third terms are tough.
Yeah.
And it'd be important what 2015 and 2016 looked like with the economy and everything else.
Yeah. Steve, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, clearly she's the front runner for the nomination, but I don't think it's essential. What was our number, 72% for her in the Democratic field? I still wouldn't bet a lot of money on it yet. There's still a lot of candidates out there, and I think her general election prospects are very, very questionable. I think if you can't run a campaign on the two videos of her with the Russian reset button, with the Russian foreign minister, and the Benghazi quote about what difference does it make, you can't run a campaign against anybody. I think she's very vulnerable. I think right now her entire record is as Secretary of State, and it's entirely out of her hands what happens.
And so let's turn to the diffuse group right now of wannabes on the GOP side. Who are you watching? If one of them were to win, and I get invited to New York inauguration, which I won't be, who's sending me the letter?
I mean, I like Marco Rubio, and I know now there's been a lot of talk about his resurgence after his falling from grace after the immigration bill passed the Senate and then died, especially really at the hands of conservative Republicans. When you meet Marco Rubio, the thing about him is he is very engaging. He's smart. He has a gravitas to him now that he didn't back when he was first in the Senate. There's a reason that he's spending a lot of time now taking these overseas trips. But the most important thing about him, beyond the fact, right, you say he can handle for the demographic divide, he's perfect to have. He's Cuban, not he is, which is different from being generic Hispanic. But the fact is, he comes from an immigrant family. Here's the most important thing about him, because I think the demographic problem is an issue for Republicans, but the bigger problem, I think, is their empathy gap. You saw it so predominantly with Mitt Romney and the 47% and all of those things. Really, there's a sense among the minority population, came in your polls too, this idea that nobody's looking out for the middle class, people don't understand us, they're only looking out for rich people. You put Marco Rubio on the ticket who, again, working class, middle class family, dad was a bartender, he moved around as a kid, having a life that looks much more like America than Mitt Romney's or John McCain's. And when you talk to him too, he can do that Bill Clinton thing of the sort of the I feel your pain thing, where he'll weave in a story, no matter what policy you're talking about. He'll go, oh yeah, well, you know, I was at my kid's soccer game and this woman came up to me and talked to me about the fact that her parents are being deported and what can I do about this, and blah, blah, blah. I talked to this other woman who's working 2 jobs. You know, she stopped me at the carpool line, right? He's normal. And Republicans need someone normal. They haven't had that in a while.
We're not too far from the GW Bridge.
Yeah.
Now, at the risk of having your Easy Pass revoked, what's your sense of, is Christie done?
We had in our brand new NBC Wall Street Journal poll, we had a very striking finding that Christie now has a net negative, favorable, unfavorable rating with the own party, with Republicans. And that is, and everybody here has been covering politics for a very long time. I can't ever remember a presidential prospect having a net negative rating among his own party. You can do the opposition party, of course, independents. Barack Obama was able to win without the independent vote in 2012, but boy, that's really hard. And then just quickly, outside of Christie, I think the person who has the chance to be the most interesting person, I don't know necessarily he's going to win, it's going to be Rand Paul. And the way that I almost see Rand Paul as a Howard Dean type of figure for the Democrats in 2004, he really wants to change the institution of the Republican Party when it comes to foreign policy, how it relates to younger voters. He also is kind of wants to be able to get in more African American and Latino vote, but I can see someone like him shooting out, just like Howard Dean did in late 2003, and then I can see the rest of the Republican Party just bringing him back down to earth.
Absolutely.
And because of that storyline, I think that Rand Paul is a fascinating person to watch over the next year.
I agree. I think the thing about Paul is he's not reacting to, his positions like on the drones and on privacy seem to be deeply held. He's not reacting to the political wind of the moment, which was what Rubio in so much trouble a year ago. On immigration, where he reacted to Rush Limbaugh's criticism and changed course. Rand Paul really seems centered in that libertarian philosophy. It's very passionate in the party. It's only about 20%. He doesn't have the negatives his father had, but his support is rock solid. And I think we'll see for the next year and a half, the rest of that field reacting more to him than he reacts to them.
Interesting. There's one other character in all of this that we should talk a little more about, and we've only hinted at it really, and that's the economy, which continues to be, in politics, the most important fact. And it's a really unusual period in the economy because macroeconomically, the economy is not doing so bad, but it is a fact that most individuals aren't doing so well. They're not. The fruits of this economy are ending up mostly in the coffers of corporations and in the hands of a relatively small slice of the country. I'm not saying that as a member of Occupy Wall Street. It's just an economic reality. That is the truth. What you want to make of that truth politically is a very different question, and it's obviously that's why Obama has latched on all these issues about the minimum wage and overtime, not because those actually will have a huge impact, but because symbolically they say something about it. And the question of unleashing the vast trillions that are actually kind of sitting there not being used terribly much right now. And how that plays out over the next 2 years could have a big impact on the presidential race.
Yeah. And I think in your poll, and we've seen it also, the number of people think the country's still in a recession, despite the official end 5 years ago.
And in fact,
enormous.
for them, it might well be.
But our deficit has also gone down. And if I went and I walked outside and I just polled 20 people and I said, do you think our deficit has gone down? Absolutely not. I'm sure it's gone up 10 times since we had this discussion. So there is a disconnect in many ways because the politicians are still making it the issue, right? They've been demagoguing some of these issues so successfully that they're actually stepping on their own success.
And there's one other element here, which is kind of captured in both of your polls, but a little bit sideways, which is that there's a tremendous anxiety right now. People are unsettled, and some of that is about the kind of economic questions we're used to talking about, the ones we've been talking about, but some of it is about this larger disruption, the sense of the world moving away from you, the sense that you need skills you didn't used to have, that your kids may know how to do something, but you don't. There's a lot of that in the world, and of course, so the older cohort has that, and the younger cohort has the problem they can't find a job.
Right.
They may have their degree, but they can't get work. Sorry for those of you.
It's not a problem for us in America.
But so there's,
Every kid gets a job.
I don't know if anybody has a poll question that just captures actual anxiety, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's higher now than it's been in many, many years.
Well, there's so much change. I mean, just not economic change or change in the workforce, but technological change that has just been happening so quickly. Societal change, we're talking about gay marriage, marijuana legalization. And so I like a lot of this anxiety, and I know I have this in the office, and I still feel very young. I still feel like I'm hip and know everything that's going on. But there is this kind of sense of
I
like,
was never hip.
That's true, by the way.
that you can't relate to some of these changes that are happening, and that I think produces the anxiety.
No, I think I just jump in. Economic change, technological change, demographic change. It's a lot like the turn of the century 100 years ago.
Right.
Exactly.
It was this turmoil, this ferment out of which then grew a new order, the progressive era. But I don't see Teddy Roosevelt out here anywhere moving this country in one direction or the other. I don't see anyone with the skills to match the time.
Well, that was actually going to be my last question, which is, we're talking about very serious issues and very serious concerns that people have. We're looking at the field, I mean, even broadly speaking. Is there someone here that you see being able to take the reins and for people to have confidence in the White House and in their leadership?
I think a lot of presidents get honeymoons. Not every president, but a lot of presidents do get honeymoons. It's because the role of the President of the United States is different than being prime minister. There is almost this, you're head of government, but also head of state, and people want to, when you see that first inaugural parade, and even if you didn't vote for the guy, you kind of have a sense of pride. And so there is something that you can do, but the biggest ability to make change is to, well, does that person who just been elected, does his party have supermajorities in Congress to be able to get those things done? Does this person have luck on his or her side? Do you end up getting some breaks in diplomatic and international affairs? And those are things you really can't be able to predict. But what you can predict is that for at least a month, maybe a year, you do get a little honeymoon to where people say, hey, maybe this new guy will be able to turn things around.
I don't know. I just also believe we're in an era where you can't really win as a leader anymore. I mean, you know, it's sort of trite to say this, but could you imagine, right, Abraham Lincoln in the era of Twitter, right? Like Gettysburg Address, snoozer, right? You know, like we give it a C, right? It was too short. You know, we grade it a C minus. You know, you can't judge presidents in the way that we did in the past. Teddy Roosevelt did not have those same challenges. Just reading the Robert Caro books and you see what Lyndon Johnson was able to do. You can't do that now. The stuff that they did, he brought bags of cash in paper bags back from Texas and handed it out. That's what you did. You don't do that now. So our expectations are that everybody can be Lincoln. In fact, someone said this to me that was great, that they said the other difficulty about being president is when you walk through, you know, every president has the pictures. They have, you know, Lincoln and they have JFK, and he's like, I think we need to have, you know, Millard Fillmore, just a big picture of him, or, you know, Franklin Pierce, because every president thinks that they're going to have to be Abraham Lincoln. Well, you know what? Not everybody gets to be Abraham Lincoln. Just get the job done, and then you can, you know, worry about that later.
The last time this country was really happy with its president was Bill Clinton. And it was largely based on peace and prosperity. There weren't a lot of big initiatives passing Congress.
That's right.
His legacy was people kind of liked what the country was doing in the 90s. Now, some of that was luck of the draw with the technologically.
But we had a government shutdown at the time. We had a presidential impeachment. We had this scam. I mean, I think the economy was doing so well at the time that you look at the polling, people were happy. President Clinton's approval ratings at the time were sky high, but his personal ratings were on the opposite spectrum because people didn't approve of his personal handling of things.
But there was a surplus.
But I do think it's kind of sometimes a little eye of the beholder, that I think sometimes the past always does look better than the present or even the future.
Yeah, and we're seeing in our numbers, I know, this huge anti-incumbency out there. We saw it in Andrew Cuomo's numbers, all-time low since he's taken office. In terms of his approval rate, not as favorable. De Blasio, honeymoon over in New York, elected by a huge landslide.
Well, can you imagine that if in 1998 I walked in here and I said, you know, by 2015, Bill Clinton and the Pope in your poll are going to have the same approval ratings. Which they are. They're both at 55%.
Pope's just a little bit.
Oh, Pope's a teeny bit higher than Bill Clinton.
Well, who knows? We might end up with Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton.
Which
and
is,
Bush versus Clinton. We'll come back right back to where we...
That is a very possible scenario.
Yeah.